She arrived in faded sneakers and a simple linen shirt, and they pounced. "Are you lost, dear? Staff parking's out back," one sneered. Another laughed, "Hope she's not here to serve lunch." The whispers cut sharp, followed by cruel glances and flashing iPhones. Laughter echoed through the country club's grand hall as she was asked to move out of the members' lounge. But just as humiliation peaked, the glass doors swung wide. Her billionaire husband, the very man who owned the club, walked in. His first words shattered the room. "Why is my wife not sitting at the head table?" The Sterling Pines Country Club wasn't just exclusive, it was sacred. Perched on a sun-soaked cliffside in Newport, its sprawling greens rolled endlessly into the horizon, kissed by ocean winds. Membership here wasn't bought. It was inherited, handed down through generations like fine china or family crests. On this cloudless Saturday afternoon, the ladies' invitational luncheon was in full bloom. A symphony of privilege played beneath the glass-domed atrium. Chandeliers dripped crystals overhead, tables gleamed with polished silver, chairs were draped in monogrammed ivory linen. Everywhere, women glided in pastel Chanel and bespoke Dior, their laughter light, practiced, and sharp-edged. This was their arena, the country club queens as they were quietly known. At noon sharp, the queen bee herself arrived, Veronica Ashford. Widow to a banking titan, she wore her power like her diamonds, loud and impossible to ignore. A Hermes Birkin dangled from her manicured hand, and her smile was a thin blade as she air-kissed her circle. "Darling, did you see the guest list?" she cooed to Leela Wyndham, wife of a venture capitalist whose name graced Ivy League libraries. "New faces." Leela's pearl-strung neck stiffened. Hope it's not another social climber trying to blend in." Their eyes darted as the side doors opened quietly. She slipped in unnoticed at first, a woman in her early 30s. White linen shirt slightly creased, tan slacks clean but far from designer, her sneakers plain, slightly scuffed. She carried no handbag, no jewelry save for a simple wedding band glinting softly under the chandelier light. Her hair was pulled back loosely, understated. Her face, free of makeup, radiated only calm. Her name was Grace Harrison. She paused briefly at the entrance, scanning for the hostess, but that moment of hesitation was enough. Veronica noticed, so did Leela, and Ava Doyle, whose husband owned 3 NFL teams, and Chelsea Monroe, heiress to a luxury hotel chain. It spread like wildfire. "Staff," someone whispered first, puzzled. "Assistant," another guessed. No, day guessed at best. "Look at her shoes. Is she really wearing sneakers?" Veronica's lips curled with amusement as Grace moved toward the sign-in table. "Sweetheart," she called, loud enough for every table to pause, members only in the main hall. "Guest brunch is next door." Grace stopped, her voice was soft, polite. "I'm here for the ladies' invitational." Silence sharp and cruel. "That's so," Veronica replied sweetly, eyes narrowing. "Name, dear." "Grace Harrison." Something flickered. Brief, a shared glance, that surname, but it passed as fast as it came. "Well, Grace, we do encourage business casual, not yoga chic." Leela chimed in, voice laced with faux warmth. A laugh rippled through the room. Phones came out casual, cruel. Snaps of Grace's outfit, sent straight to the club's private group chat. Country Club Queen's inner circle. Someone's lost. "Who let the nanny in?" "VIP lounge, and she's wearing Keds." Grace simply smiled, holding the strap of her tote lightly. "I'll find my table, thank you," she said, unfazed. She moved gracefully toward an empty seat, but Ava slid her clutch across. "Taken," she said flatly. Every table did the same. Grace was left standing, alone in a sea of smirks. "Perhaps outside," Veronica suggested, voice sweet as poison. "The terrace has shade." The room hummed with amusement as Grace, still silent, nodded and made her way out, escorted only by invisible daggers. In their eyes, she didn't belong. In their world, clothes and diamonds wrote the rules, and Grace, in her linen and sneakers, had already lost the game, or so they thought. The terrace wasn't shaded. It was exposed, just like her. Grace sat alone at a small wrought iron table tucked into the farthest corner of the veranda. The sun hit her squarely, harsh and unfiltered, baking the linen of her shirt and turning her into a spectacle for the passing socialites. But that was precisely the point. Isolation wasn't enough. It never was with women like them. They needed performance. They needed blood. Inside, the luncheon bloomed. Champagne flutes clinked. Outside, silence pressed heavy, broken only by the occasional cruel glance tossed in Grace's direction through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It didn't take long. Veronica emerged first, a queen surveying her court. Behind her came Leela, Ava, and Chelsea, the unholy trinity of sterling pines. Perfect hair, glossy lips, pastel dresses. They glided toward Grace's table like sharks smelling faint blood. "Poor dear," Veronica began, loud enough for the nearby tables to turn. "Must be scorching out here. But you know, rules are rules. Loungewear is for lounge areas, after all." Laughter dry, sharp. Grace offered only a mild smile. "It's a beautiful day. I'm fine." But fine wasn't enough, not for them. Veronica leaned in slightly, her voice faux soft. "Grace, do you actually belong here?" Leela covered a laugh poorly. Ava didn't bother. "Some of us were discussing," Leela added, swirling her mimosa delicately. "Maybe you're one of those golf pros' wives, or new money, or," her eyes flickered downward, pointedly at Grace's shoes, "support staff." A small crowd had gathered now. Not openly, not yet, but eyes peered from behind sunglasses, heads tilted toward phones, subtle but intentional. Grace didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was read as weakness. It only emboldened them. "Or maybe you're here with the caterers," Ava joined, her voice syrupy with malice. "I could use a refill, sparkling, no ice." She gestured casually to her empty glass, smirking as the group erupted into quiet, vicious giggles. Grace held her ground, calm, poised, but the cracks were beginning to show. Her hand, resting gently on her knee, tightened into a pale fist. Inside the hall, the group chat exploded. Chelsea's photo, a zoom on Grace's simple wedding band and tote bag, hit the feed first. The help came dressed up. "This club used to have standards. Country club or soup kitchen." By the time Vanessa Hall, late but always eager for blood, strutted in wearing Valentino and oversized black glasses, the story had already been written. She joined the others with seamless cruelty. "Who's that on the terrace? Oh, is that her?" She didn't wait for confirmation. Vanessa clapped twice for dramatic effect, drawing the attention of half the dining hall. "Ladies, we've found our event photographer," she called, her voice slicing through the music. "Come on, darling," she added, turning to Grace. "Be a sweetheart and take a group shot for us. We promise to tag you." Phones went up. Laughter rippled like cruel confetti tossed into the wind. Grace didn't rise, didn't speak, but her stillness read differently now, not weak, cold. Veronica squinted slightly, unsettled for half a second, but only half. Because just then the head of the club's event committee approached Grace's table. Evelyn Rowe, 40-something, thin as a blade, her pearls immaculate. "Excuse me," Evelyn said, loudly enough for all to hear. "I'm afraid guests who are not members, or accompanied by members, will need to vacate this area immediately." There it was, the kill shot. Grace stood slowly, collected. She picked up her tote and met Evelyn's eyes. "I see," she said simply. The crowd leaned forward, breath held, ready to feast on the final humiliation. She stepped away from the table, walked past Veronica, Leela, Ava, the whole glittering wall of cruelty, without a single word, as if none of them mattered. And that silence, more than anything, made them seethe. They didn't know yet, but they would. Grace didn't protest, she simply walked. Each step off the terrace felt like passing through invisible checkpoints of judgment. Murmurs trailed behind her like perfume. She didn't even argue. "I would have died of shame. Probably snuck in hoping for free champagne." She reached the entrance of the clubhouse, just as Evelyn gestured discreetly to the security desk. "Escort her out, please," Evelyn instructed, her words honeyed for appearance, razor-sharp in meaning. "She's made quite enough of a scene." The young security guard hesitated, his eyes flickering from Evelyn to Grace. Grace gave him a soft, exhausted smile. "That won't be necessary," she said gently, but already Veronica was on her feet, striding toward the door, arms crossed in performative disgust. "Oh, please," Veronica called out theatrically, drawing attention from every corner of the grand hall. "Let's not waste club resources. I'm sure she knows her way back to the parking lot, assuming she didn't Uber here." Laughter again. But it wasn't light anymore. It was hungry. Cruelty had layered itself too thick now. Even the guests who didn't know Veronica well leaned in, eager to watch the outsider collapse. Even Evelyn's tight professional facade cracked into a satisfied smirk as she crossed her arms beside Veronica. Grace turned. For a fleeting second, something flickered behind her emerald eyes. Not anger, not pain, conviction. But no one saw it. They were too busy reveling. A new voice broke through the static of Schadenfreude. Brooke, a younger wife still fighting for a permanent place among the queens, chimed in like a child eager to please. Next time wear pearls, not payless, she said, loud enough for phones to catch. Her friends gasped, delighted at her boldness. The humiliation crescendoed. By now, nearly every phone in the room was raised. Not so secretly recording Grace as she stood alone, awash in golden afternoon light that felt more like a spotlight in an interrogation room. A live stream on Instagram lit up. Country Club Chronicles, Charity Wife Meltdown Incoming Face with Tears of Joy. Even the club's assistant GM, a young man in a tight navy suit desperate to climb the social ladder, leaned toward Evelyn and whispered smugly, "This one's going viral." Grace did not break. She didn't storm out, she didn't argue, she didn't beg. Instead, she reached calmly into her tote, pulled out her phone, and typed, not frantic, not angry, methodical, smooth. The action was so simple it unnerved them more than any outburst could have. Veronica narrowed her eyes, suddenly feeling something shift in the air, just slightly, but before she could react. The doors opened, and everything stopped. Not a gradual fade, not a soft hush. A snap, clean and brutal, like a string pulled taut and severed in a single merciless cut. He walked in, Ethan Harrison, tailored gray suit, subtle, perfect. No flashy watch, no overdone bravado, but every inch of him radiated power, not the gaudy, performative power these women adored. Real power, the kind that made CFOs stand straighter. The kind that made hedge fund titans pause mid-sentence. Every eye turned, every phone lowered instinctively. Veronica's mouth opened, then closed. Evelyn stumbled back half a step, her spine locking rigid. Ethan didn't glance at them. His gaze cut through the sea of silk and diamonds like a blade finding its mark. It landed only on her, on Grace. And when he spoke, his voice rolled through the atrium like thunder, breaking a suffocating summer afternoon. "Why," he asked, each word deliberate, heavy, "is my wife standing at the door while my club laughs?" The queens froze, panic bloomed instantly, ugly and unrestrained. They had made a mistake, a fatal one. And as Ethan stepped forward, not rushed, but controlled, terrifyingly so, they realized the game had just flipped. Grace didn't need to defend herself. He would do it for her, and that, more than anything, terrified them. Silence, thick, suffocating, absolute. Ethan's shoes clicked against the marble as he crossed the atrium, each step measured, inevitable. He stopped in front of Grace, his hand finding hers with a tenderness that cut deeper than any shouted defense. His thumb brushed lightly across her knuckles, a silent apology, a silent promise. Only then did he turn to the room, to the so-called queens, to Evelyn, who shrank behind her champagne glass, to Veronica, whose mouth trembled with a half-formed excuse, to Brooke, who clutched her pearl-studded clutch like it might shield her from what was coming. Ethan's voice was soft when it returned, but somehow it carried to every corner of the club. "My wife," he said, letting the word linger like a hammer above an anvil, "built Harrison Trust Scholarship Initiative. She's responsible for sending over 300 underprivileged students to Ivy League schools, students whose parents couldn't dream of affording a single month's dues here." The room shifted. A ripple of unease passed among the crowd. She personally reviewed every grant, every application, every desperate letter from parents who believed their child deserved a chance. He squeezed Grace's hand gently. "And yet here you are," Ethan continued, his eyes flicking over each trembling face, mocking her for choosing not to waste money on a dress that could feed a family of 4 for a year. Veronica opened her mouth again, desperate. "Ethan, we didn't know." He cut her off with a look so sharp it could have stripped paint from the walls. "You didn't care to know," he said, every syllable cold and precise. "And worse, you made it a sport." Someone's phone slipped from their hand, clattering against the marble, the sound obscene in the heavy silence. Across the hall, the club's general manager, sensing an unstoppable shift in the wind, hurried toward Ethan. "Mr. Harrison," he began, "please allow us to." Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This club exists," he said, his gaze sweeping the velvet chairs, the glittering chandeliers, the gold-embossed menus, "because I chose to invest here. Chose to make it a place for families to thrive, not a playground for arrogance." He reached into the inner pocket of his suit and pulled out a slim envelope. "Effective immediately," Ethan said, handing the envelope to the GM. "The Harrison Family Trust is withdrawing all funding." A collective gasp swept the room, as real and physical as a slap. The GM fumbled the envelope, his face blanching. $50 million, Ethan said casually, his arm slipping protectively around Grace's waist. "Gone, along with our membership." A stunned cry broke from somewhere near the front. Evelyn, her face had gone the color of chalk, her perfectly lined lips trembling. But you can't, this will kill the renovation project, she stammered. The new athletic wing. Ethan's smile was thin and brutal. Find someone else to bankroll your tennis courts, he said. Grace watched, silent but steady as the elite crumbled. It wasn't just the loss of money, it was status. Without Harrison Trust's name on the donor wall, without Ethan's patronage, the club would fall from favor. Fast. Already, whispers raced through the crowd. We need to call an emergency board meeting. Maybe he'll reconsider. Get PR on the phone now. But it was too late. Ethan turned to Grace, his voice warm again as if they were alone. You ready to go, darling? She smiled, a real smile this time, small and luminous, more than ready. He tucked her arm under his, and together they walked out, their steps measured and unhurried. Behind them, the queens of the club, once towering, untouchable, collapsed under the weight of their own cruelty. The true royalty had been standing in front of them all along, and they had spit on her crown. The parking lot of Sterling Pines had never known such silence. As Grace and Ethan emerged, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across rows of Teslas and Bentleys. It should have felt cold, humiliating, like a retreat. But Grace didn't feel small, not anymore. She felt light, like something heavy had been pulled from her chest, discarded back in that chandelier prison where diamonds dulled in fear and whispers turned to ashes. Ethan opened the car door for her, something simple, familiar. No grand gesture, no theatrics, but it cut deeper than the million-dollar rings left trembling inside. As they drove, the distance between them and Sterling Pines grew. But for the first time that day, Grace's hand slid over Ethan's, her fingers lacing gently with his. He broke the quiet first. I should have come sooner, he said, voice low, regretful. Grace's lips curved softly, a far cry from the polite smile she wore like armor hours earlier. No, she said quietly. You came exactly when you were supposed to. Ethan's eyes flicked toward her, confused. Grace turned slightly, her gaze distant but steady, as if seeing through the windshield into something far beyond. They needed to reveal themselves fully, she continued, her voice softer now but sharp beneath the surface, without restraint. Without shame, only when cruelty blooms unchecked does the world see it for what it is. Ethan was quiet, absorbing her words, the truth of them. In the world he ruled of boardrooms and billion-dollar valuations, exposure was everything. The same applied here in silk-draped dining halls and private WhatsApp groups. The same game, different stakes. As they passed the gates of their oceanfront estate, Grace finally exhaled. Home, where wealth didn't parade itself through labels. Where power didn't wear pearls or hiss from behind frozen smiles. Where Lily waited, safe, giggling in the garden with their dog and the gentle hum of a life free from performance. They stepped inside. Grace slipped off her linen shirt, her scuffed sneakers, not to hide them, but because she didn't need them anymore. In their sunlit kitchen, she brewed tea. No staff, no audience, just them. Ethan sat at the island, watching her move with the quiet reverence of a man who knew exactly who his wife was and always had been. You know they'll come crawling back, he said eventually, stirring his cup absently. Veronica, Evelyn, the board, they'll beg. Grace only smiled faintly. They won't have to, she said. Ethan frowned, puzzled. They've already lost, Grace continued, meeting his eyes with calm certainty. Because when they finally understand who they humiliated, the wives of tech titans, the heirs of oil empires, the whisper networks that make and break fortunes, they'll see every door they thought was theirs. Gone. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper, but sharper than ever. And every time they pour a drink, dress for a gala, or host another vapid luncheon, they'll know they mocked me. Not knowing I sat beside the man who controls half their board seats and investment lifelines. Ethan stared at her, and for the first time that day, smiled with something bordering on awe. You're crueler than me, he said softly, a trace of admiration in his voice. No, Grace said, sipping her tea gracefully, just quieter. Outside, the sun disappeared behind the sea, leaving only warm, fading light. Sterling Pines would go on. The diamonds would still gleam, the champagne still pour, but every room would echo hollow, every laugh forced, because they knew now. The true queen had walked among them in worn flats and linen, and they had spat at her crown. And she never even needed to raise her voice.